You are welcome to today's episode of Chronicles of a Nigerian Woman. My name is Fagbeja, and today I'll be reading Asabe's story. I got married as a virgin. My parents were pastors and I got born again early, so I have always followed that way of life. It was not a struggle for me to keep my chastity. It was what I wanted and it flowed from my heart. Danladi is every woman's dream of what a good man ought to be. I call him my personal blessing and gift from God. He has such a good heart, it is almost impossible to find any guile whatsoever in him. We both attended university together and we became good friends from the first time we met through some mutual friends in our second year. It was in our final year that he made his intentions about marriage known to me. I wasn't entirely surprised because we had been close for some time, but we hadn't been anything more than friends. I was so happy because I knew that any woman would be lucky to have a man like Danladi in her corner. We got married right after our service year. He had always wanted to trade in farm produce, and he started during his youth service. He obtained a loan from his uncle and started to send foodstuff to the south from Jos, where we both were. I was retained in the bank where I served. 2 years into our marriage, I hadn't got pregnant and we went to the doctors. And that was when they broke the devastating news to me that I would never be able to have children. I was told that I had a unicornate uterus, which means I have only one fallopian tube, and in my case, that single fallopian tube was blocked. I felt as though my life was over. I cried and cried. I had to take some time off work because I could not do anything. I was only 26. How could I live with this life sentence? I felt as though God was punishing me, and I couldn't understand what I had done to deserve this kind of punishment. It was particularly hard because both Danladi and I loved children. Danladi was not happy about it either, but he kept reassuring me that we would get through it together and that God would see us through the challenging times and create a way for us to fulfill our family dreams. His family and mine were also very supportive. I went for counseling and that helped a lot. After the 6 weeks of counseling, I started to see the light again and we decided that we would adopt children. It was not an easy decision to reach, but we reasoned that it was better to start early. Over the next 7 years, we adopted 3 babies, 2 girls and 1 boy. Because we adopted them as babies, I went through the process of raising them as though I gave birth to them myself. It was such a wonderful experience of bonding with them. After the 3rd adoption, I decided to quit my job to be more available for my children. I was happy to spend much more time with them, but after a year, I got bored. Around the same time, a couple of sisters in the women's fellowship at our church were going through delays in childbearing after their marriage, and I could feel their pain. Up till now, I had never shared my story except with people close to our family. In fact, only people who were very close to us knew that our children were adopted. Whenever I was in the process of adoption, I traveled out of the state to stay with my sister for a while and came back with the baby. Whenever people remarked about how they did not realize that I was pregnant, I simply smiled and offered no explanation. Anyway, as the coordinator of the women's fellowship, I started reaching out to the affected members of the fellowship, and then one day, I decided to share my story with one of them. I did not realize how hard it would be. I felt the pain from hearing the doctor's report all over again, and I cried as I spoke with her in her home that day. But once I finished sharing with her, I felt free, like a burden had been taken off my mind. But the more important thing was how inspired she felt. She told me how my story and experience gave her hope, especially since she would never have known that the children were adopted if she hadn't been told. Leaving the fellowship sister's place that day, I could not get over the effect my story had on her, and I started thinking of speaking with more women and encouraging them with my story. That was how I started sharing my story in women's groups. Over the past 15 years, I have been able to bring awareness to issues to do with women's fertility, and so many women have been inspired to consider alternative paths to parenthood, especially adoption. I am passionate about this because in the process of researching for the adoption of my children, I discovered how many children were orphans or in need of families, while so many people are spending millions to have children. My experience has taught me that parenthood is not always about having one's own biological children, but about how many children you are able to give a chance in life. And I spend my time helping women understand this and providing emotional and practical support for them through the process. I am so blessed that God has turned my devastating situation around as a channel of blessing for others. Please share your thoughts about Asabe's story in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my stories.